Good evening, namaste. Welcome to this session of Learning Curve Live. Today we will be in conversation with Pranali Sharma and Rima Kaur on the topic of worksheets for preschool. They have together written an article on this in our current issue of the Learning Curve. Let me introduce you to the speakers. Ranali Sharma is a senior lecturer at the Azim Premji University, Bangalore. She has a PhD in Human Development and Childhood Studies from the University of Delhi. She is involved in large-scale assessments, developing courses on childhood studies, socio-emotional learning, and capacity-building programs for teachers in early childhood education. Rima Kaur is a senior lecturer at the Azim Premji University, Bangalore. She has a master's in education from Ambedkar University, Delhi. And her areas of interest are early language and literacy and early childhood education. Talking to them is Nimrat Kaur. Nimrat has been with the Azim Premji Foundation for a decade now. She is currently part of the School of Continuing Education and University Resource Center. Nimrat contributes to teacher professional development programs. She works primarily in the space of teacher education and assessments. She has also contributed to teacher education curriculum and material development. She's also a part of the editorial team of the Learning Curve. Welcome, Pranalee, Rima, Nimrat. This is a 1-hour session and we will close at 5:30. We will try and take as many questions as we can during this time, audience questions that is. Please send us your questions in the chat box. All three of our speakers are proficient in Hindi and English. Now over to you, Nimrat, to take us through this fascinating topic with Rima and Pranali.
Thank you very much. Oh, there's an echo. I hope it's better now. I don't. There's an echo at my end. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, we are.
All right. Thank you. So, Rima, Pranali, I was really excited about this opportunity to discuss your article with you because I found it very timely with all the focus on the foundational stage, as you also mentioned in your article. And along with that, the whole focus on materials and materials of different kinds that should be used in the foundational stage as well as other stages, of course. But if the draft NEP really focuses a lot on materials in that state. I was just wondering, the title of your article is Fun Worksheets for Preschool Learning. Children are that stage, and of course later as well, but they're learning a lot outside school as well during this time. And even before they enter school, while they're in school, there's this whole continuum, I think, of what's happening outside school and within school in terms of learning. How does the learning in school differ from the learning that they have outside the school? And should worksheets build on this continuum? May I request Rima to respond? Or Pranali, whoever would.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. Children do know and have a lot of time in school, and the years are roughly from 3 or 6 years of age. So although they learn a lot, they are still in this window of their lives, which are their formative years. So they don't physically, and they come to preschool, they continue to grow physically. Learn about the world, they their interests, they are changing, they make friendships, break friendships, and rapidly to use language. So all of these early experiences are really important, and we've seen time and again how the early childhood years play a very, very important critical role and have lifelong impact in one's life. So it is keeping in view their knowledge and experience of the world that we can, in fact, even ask a question: is preschool education even important? if there is sort of learning that is taking place in the natural settings at home with family, friends, neighbors. So I do believe importance and the necessity of preschool education. And also the experiences that children have outside and the learning that takes place outside in these formative years is extremely important. It has limitless value. But the kind of cognitive experiences and growth that preschool setting can provide, if there is a well-designed, developmentally appropriate preschool curriculum, then, as I mentioned earlier, there are immense long-term benefits. Not just academic, but if you look at the long-term economic benefits, the long-term social benefits, for that child, the child's family, the locality, and the country at large, then they are immeasurable almost, and studies have proven that. So it's important that whatever children bring to the classroom is included, is understood by teacher, and something that is safe for all stages of schooling, isn't it? That we need to understand, respect, value, and include children's prior experiences from outside school. And in these formative years, it becomes even more important. And among all of this curricular material learning experiences that children have, we have our worksheets. So they are one of the innumerable materials that children have access to. So that is how I wouldn't really get into how learning differs or why it differs, but to value these formative years of a child's life and to include them, and therefore worksheets as one of the curricular material are also developmentally appropriate, so that the long-term benefits of preschool education on the child's life, are taken into account. Yeah.
Thank you, Rima, so much for that. Pranali, anything you'd like to add? Because
Not much. It's just that, like what Rima was saying, children learn a lot by the time they enter preschool, right? Which is roughly around 3 years, and they that is the age when they are stepping into the world beyond their house. So they know a lot, and but the importance and the necessity of preschool education is also very important, and how to scaffold that prior knowledge into the learning within the classroom setting is where the teacher's role comes in, and the learning that takes place outside school with family, friends, it is of immense value, but how to put it in a manner where the child is pulled from their actual to their potential, right? So yeah.
yeah, that's very interesting. Rima mentioned the term developmentally appropriate, and that is something that I came across in your article as well. You've said at one point that disregarding developmentally appropriate practices and force fitting young children in learning and assessment are incongruent with young children's needs. And further, while you're discussing the attributes of a good worksheet, you mentioned that a good worksheet must be developmentally appropriate. So, Pranali, could you elaborate on the developmental appropriateness, connecting this to young children's needs? In fact, define the term needs as you have used it in your article itself.
Mhm. So, what is developmental appropriateness? So, I think explaining that might also give clarity on why we are saying it is necessary for a child's learning. So, young children have diverse needs. They are from diverse backgrounds. Their levels of intellectual, emotional, and social development they vary. We cannot claim that all 3 to 4 year olds will be at the same level of learning or same stage of development. A child learning to walk, for example, may not talk while the walking is mastered, or the reverse, right? So neither child is slow actually in the neglected domain. It is just the child's pace. So developmentally appropriate practice is based on the child-centered philosophy of education. It promotes the idea that children need to actively engage and construct their own knowledge. A few points I'd like to talk about on how developmentally appropriate practices look like. The curriculum and the experiences that actively engage children. Now, what does that even mean? No, what does the curriculum that actively engage children? The curriculum, we know it contains all kinds of plans, the learning experiences, which are activities, and through which children acquire knowledge, skills, abilities, dispositions, values, and attitudes. And we all have a curriculum in place. Without that, the teacher will be at a loss. So, in developmentally appropriate practice, the curriculum helps young children to achieve goals that are meaningful to them. Like Rima was saying, bringing in the context, into the classroom. That something that is culturally, linguistically relevant for the child, developmentally significant. The curriculum does this through, the learning experiences, of course, the activities, of course, and we have to see that every child is taken into account. Now then, there can be teacher supported play. Play is, of course, it's one of the most important ways in which young children gain knowledge. We all know that play is basically work for them, right? So play is, for them, it's work. But for this reason, play opportunities and environments that promote exploration, hands-on learning, that should be the core at this stage. So when children apply concepts of quantity, science, and movement to real life, I'll give you an example that if the child is pasting a picture with seeds, outline of a picture with seeds, then the teacher might guide their thinking by saying, for example, I like these big seeds. How many do you think we might need to cover this area? So that kind of questions, that guided support that the teacher might provide within that play, so that actually helps. And then the integrated curriculum, that is also one of the practices, for developmental appropriateness, bringing in all the domains of learning together, bringing reading, writing, drama, music, visual arts, math, science, everything. And also taking into account the school culture, bringing in that families and communities. So that also just reminds me that it's important to bring in, encourage child's initiative and their ability to make choices, in such developmentally appropriate practice, that such programs basically. Also, giving choice doesn't mean that the child can do whatever they want at whatever time. It does come with some limitations. Freedom, it doesn't mean that they'll just go. It needs to be, guided. Without that, there can be, a lack of self discipline or lack of purpose. So freedom in this, in such a program, in the developmentally appropriate practice, freedom means the freedom to work at your own pace, right? Freedom to repeat the same activity. The teacher won't say that, okay, done, your time is up. That doesn't happen. You can repeat till you achieve the mastery, to strengthen your skills basically, and to build confidence and all. So I think that is okay. You asked about the needs as well. um, See, there has always been a myth that there is only one right way to implement a developmentally appropriate program, but that is not correct. Teachers and administrators may come up and ask, is it okay to show children how to hold a pencil? When do we start cursive writing? When do you start, writing, holding a pen and writing words and letters? So these kind of queries shows the efforts to build a single one correct approach, like one child fits, that the whole thing, that every child will follow the same process. So it depends on many variables, such as the child's current level of understanding, the experiences the child might have, um, the kind of previous knowledge, like Rima was talking about, the skills the child brings, So all these contextual elements play a huge role, and it impacts the goals, the strategies, and the pedagogical techniques of the teacher too. So it should be kept in mind that what was optimal for the last year's class may not be for this year. So that is what we meant by needs of children, Nimrat. Yeah.
Thank you, Pranali. I found that so interesting the way, this is really a great example of how theory is connecting to practice, because you kept referring to the larger ideas around the development of children, which is a purely theoretical perspective, and how it has actually been implemented in the classroom. So that was very, very interesting. So, Rima, in the article, you refer to the preschool curriculum developed by NCRT in 2019, which suggests using fun worksheets. Um, how can one create a worksheet that ensures both learning and is fun to do? Is it possible to do both? Just wondering.
Yes, so when Pranali and I were writing the article and thinking of a name, we didn't want to send across the wrong message, because we said, fun, and then it sounds very vague. So now we have to, justify ourselves. Why did we say that? So, no, you're right. See, fun and learning, they needn't be mutually exclusive, isn't it? And when we think of fun, and if the first thing that comes to mind when we think of fun worksheets is, lots of coloring and drawing, and then when we think of learning worksheets, we see lots of numbers and lots of reading and writing to do. So that is what we all need to rethink, isn't it? Especially at this stage of preschool education that we are talking about. That what do we understand by fun? What do we understand by learning itself? And how do we imagine and understand learning in the preschool years to take place? All of this is what we were thinking about. And often, when these terms like fun and interesting and joyful are used, we might, as adults, have certain specific notions of what this means. And the image of a child having fun could be of a child jumping around, laughing, which is fine. But then when we talk of joyful learning through fun, then there are certain capacities that children already have, and I'll talk about that in a bit. If we take an example of a preschool class, okay, so if there's a teacher, and with the teacher's help, the children, they have a rhyme about fruit or vegetables or something, some eatable that children like. After singing that rhyme that has lots of actions, if there is a discussion that the teacher has with children, what do they like to eat, what did they have for breakfast, what did they have the previous day, where do they purchase or their parents purchase these things from. So if there's a guided conversation with lots of questions and lots of things for children to talk about, uh, it's after this, if we imagine that a teacher, hands a worksheet to a child, where there's a picture, there's either a grocery store or somebody selling fruit and vegetables, and children have to color what they want to purchase. And if they're not able to write yet, they can scribble their grocery list or something that they want to buy from this person or this store. If they can write, then they can write using conventional spellings. And after children have completed this worksheet in the class itself, with the support of the teacher moving around, then there can maybe be a role play of the market or a shopkeeper selling his or her wares. or there can be some discussion on what children like to eat. So if we imagine this entire scenario, happening inside a classroom, maybe spread over not 1 day, 2, 3 days, then what parts of this plan can we compartmentalize as fun, and what will we put under learning? So if we take another example where if children have to, if they are given a worksheet where lots of clothing items are there, and they've made a doll maybe in the class with paper or with other types of material that is found locally. They've made this doll and they have to dress up the doll, so they cut uh, items, clothing items off the worksheet, they color it, they paste it on the doll, and then there can be a puppet show that children themselves enact using the puppets. So, at what point was the use of these two worksheets that I just described not learning and only fun, or only fun and not learning? So, it's important that we reimagine how worksheets can be even used at the preschool stage, because often what happens, and we've seen that in the pandemic, that worksheets were mass printed, or stuff that is given in the textbooks was just uh, photocopied and given to children who were sitting at home. And there was no process before giving the worksheet or after. There was no discussion. There was no larger activity or experience of which children were a part. And in that sense, children attempting the worksheets was not very different from what they would do in their notebooks inside the class. So, those are certain observations that we've all had during the COVID times. So, what is the nature of worksheets that can be given to children in the preschool stage? That needs to be expanded, right? We shouldn't necessarily have worksheets that talk only about colors and shapes and sizes. We have so many other areas within these different domains of learning in preschool, uh, which are either underrepresented, or we don't have any worksheets or any discussions or material for that matter in these preschool years. So, there's a worksheet where there are lots of children, and there's a scene where a child is hurting another child while playing. It seems like a deliberate act. So imagine the conversations that we can have just on that picture that is there with every child in his or her worksheet. Okay. And then you can ask some very simple questions like, based on the attire that children wear. So you've included picture reading, you've tried to develop certain socio emotional capacities in children, you've got them to write, and you have not isolated that worksheet or that task as simply a reading and writing task. You have used that as one of the many tools in your day-to-day, classroom teaching. And something that Pranali was talking about, developmentally appropriate practice. So there are no right or wrong answers, isn't it? So based on children's responses, it's almost like the teacher and children, with the diverse responses that they give. They are all co-constructing their lesson plans. And depending on how children respond to certain activities, certain worksheets, the plan ahead is altered, and modified. And maybe in, the minutes that follow, we can talk about that a little bit more. So, so how we look at worksheets is extremely important. The other thing is how children, even young children who are 3 years, 4 years old, what are the activities that occupy them? How do they separate fun from learning, or is every interaction and every experience a learning experience for them, especially in those years, right? So I was talking about how it's not just making a lot of noise that results in, a fun, and or that means some activity is taking place. So even these very young children, they can be very quiet, and they do engage in, deliberately engage in some very purposive activities. If we've observed children in our families or in the classroom, So even these young children do that. And so, one child may sit with a broken toy and try to repair it, or try to unravel and put together something, and may do it repeatedly. So we have seen that happens. And in fact, if you have children at home and they are making a lot of noise, but suddenly they go quiet, so the parent, or the adult at home, is like instantaneously something has gone wrong, and then we rush to see what has happened. And they're usually tinkering away at something. They're probably painting their faces or the walls. So if that aspect and that nature of children can be accommodated in a good preschool curriculum, then we'll see how fun and learning are not mutually exclusive. And worksheets, naturally, some worksheets we've spoken about, we can give more examples as this webinar progresses. But they aren't merely, tools for assessing that, yes, this is what I wish to assess. And I'm going to ask this question in the form of a match the following or joining the dots. And that's it. Children have to, they have to follow these instructions and complete the worksheet, and I'm going to put it in the portfolio file, which is evidence of children's learning. So if we experiment with the possibilities that worksheets bring, they are not just A4 sheets of paper. They, as blank sheets of paper, can also be manipulated. And everything from recording how a plant grows, every week, every fortnight, and they make a simple picture, or they observe something outside that changes, or there's a worksheet where they go home, children go home and they ask something, their parents, their grandparents, they ask their parents, grandparents to note something, and they bring it back to class. uh, the possibilities are just limitless. Once we see examples of such good, fun worksheets where learning also takes place.
Thank you, Rima. So, my sense is really that the worksheet by itself may not be, the ideal way to look at but more as an integrated part of a larger process of learning. So that's my takeaway from what you've said, and I think it's great the examples you both are sharing. They really make the classroom came alive for me at least. So, Pranali, as you mentioned that this is a period of very rapid development, the age group ranged from 3 to 6 years. So how does the nature of the worksheet, how should it change during this period, so to keep up with this, the changes that are happening in the children?
True. That stage is, there's a lot of rapid development that happens within that stage. So worksheets, in the initial years, like 3 to 4, should not be about getting the right answer to anything. They're just beginning to interact with the world beyond their house. Like I said, their own family members. They're just stepping into the outside world. So these worksheets at this stage can be used to explore, experiment things around, like scribbling, painting, using colors, expressing themselves basically through these worksheets. They can paste things, they can make colored prints with different materials. So, also, as mentioned before, that developmentally appropriate practice that matters in how these worksheets are being prepared. So, what are our learning outcomes for each age group? What do we expect from a child of a particular age? That basically decides what should be the nature of the worksheet. What are we expecting from them? For example, if we have a learning outcome that says that a child in the age group of 3 to 4 years should be able to make choices, should be able to make, express their preferences as per our early learning outcomes defined by NCRT. So now making choices can also be about the child's preference of one color over another. Like the child may make a choice of using one color or two colors, or use all the colors in whatever artwork they have created. Or when a child draws his or her family, they can choose whom to put in that drawing. So that is a choice. And such worksheets, they help in achieving these learning outcomes of that particular age group. Now, also in 3 to 4 years, there's a lot of what do you call, fine motor skills that are getting refined. They can tear pages around some shapes outlined in the worksheets, stamping, finger painting, using thicker crayons and brushes and all. Also, seeing how putting together two colors can give you a new color. It is giving you a third color. So that is a discovery for the child. So basically, at this stage, the worksheets need not be limited to writing words, alphabets, or letters, like Rima said. There can be an introduction to where children can scribble their own names. That is all right. They would want to write their names. I mean, we should not be looking at how correctly they have written it, but they can scribble the names of their family members also. Idea is not to seek for the correct spelling, but to engage them in a setting, in a pre-writing skills are encouraged. Now, when we move from 3 to 4, as the child grows up, and the age group of 5 to 6 years, for example, the content of worksheets, they definitely change as per their developmental milestones. So the expectations are different. The early learning outcomes are different. The child is now able to hold a pencil or pen or crayon with much precision. So they are able to scribble with much precision, or write an alphabet, or write a word, with invented spelling, their own spelling. The drawings become more realistic by the age of 6 than they were before. At this age, they also begin to understand the significance of rules, right? So a worksheet can have simple rule based tasks like mazes. You have to bring a rabbit from this end to the carrot on the other end. So they understand the significance of rules, that there is a rule. You can't just put a straight line there. You have to go around the maze. And their fine motor skills, they start exhibiting more precision and control. So the worksheets can be made a little complex there, where they can cut shapes, cut along a line, or the line can also be made complex. It can be a zigzag line, it can be a semicircle, or like that. So they can be such that it involves more thinking than just exploratory, like it was in 3 to 4. uh, by the end of 6 years, a little more focus on writing can be included there. So basically, when we are trying to see the difference between the 3 to 4, 5 to 6 years, two things that we tend to keep in mind is to realize their potential. That is, what can we expect from them, like what to expect from a 3 to 4 year old versus what can we expect from a 5 to 6 year old. Second is designing tasks where children can express, and then where there is a goal, where there is a end task, where there is a finish line, from exploratory to where the child is involved in thinking. But again, we have to be mindful of the fact that these uh, goal oriented worksheets should not be the only ones at this stage. It should be a mix of both. I know, some exploratory, and then introducing some goal oriented worksheets. There needs to be a balance there. Yeah. Nimrat, I hope I answered that. Yeah, Rima.
Yeah, please go ahead, Rima. That
Yeah,
was
I
very,
would
very
just
useful. Thank you. Yeah, Rima.
Yeah, I would just like to share an experience. So, Pranali and I were recently with a group of preschool teachers, practitioners, and one of the groups designed a worksheet which we were a little unsure of for which age group we should in which age group we should place it. Should we place it in the 4 to 5 years age group or the 5 to 6 years age group? So the worksheet was basically a checklist. So for as a learning experience, as an activity, there was this treasure hunt that children were expected to. Uh, they were supposed to hunt for treasure, okay, in small groups. And so the first part of the activity was to get into small groups and listen to the teacher give instructions that these 5 stationary items have been hidden So one pencil, one sharpener, one eraser, and each group has to find these 5 items. So if you find two pencils, you know that one is yours and the other is somebody else's, so you can give it to another group. So that was the activity of it. Okay. And while they were doing the activity, they had this checklist and they had to put a tick mark against each item that they would find. So we had a lot of discussion, and we also took the help of other group members that, is this activity and this checklist as a worksheet, as a group worksheet, you can say, is it getting too complicated? And then we discussed how maybe for 4 to 5 years children might not yet be ready to follow these multiple instructions, but safely you can put it in 5 to 6 years, and then the teacher can modify it however he or she feels, depending on what children in the class are able to do. So this whole discussion on what is appropriate for a particular age group also can emerge. Sometimes we have doubts, but by discussing with our other practitioners, sometimes we get a lot of insights. And the other thing that I wanted to add was that sometimes we sort of underestimate children also, that, oh, 4 to 5 year old children won't be able to do something like this. It's too complicated for them. But then they surprise us doing something that we never planned for them to do. So maybe sometimes giving it a try and doing things that might seem a little complicated also gets them, challenged and gets them excited. So, as Pranali was saying, scaffolding them and presenting that bit of challenge is also very important.
Right. That's very interesting, and I guess it also goes back to what Pranali said about then not being a sharp cut, that this is what children's needs are at this age and this is what the needs are at this age. So that's very interesting. So there's a question from our audience which I'd like to ask you all. Ayushi Jain says the way you're describing how worksheets can be made fun is really nice, but I would like to know what can be a list of these topics that we can work upon. I think you can see the question also on the screen. So these would be related to the curriculum, right?
Rima, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. So, a list of topics, see, becomes quite specific in that sense. So for anybody to provide a list of topics for a school, where children come from a particular background and context, it's better if the teacher, the practitioner, and the school jointly comes up with such a list. And to help create such a list, we of course have the preschool curriculum that NCRT came up with. And now the policy is talking about a curricular framework. The idea is that the list of topics not be disjointed. So there are certain principles that we can work with, that these topics should not be isolated, they should not be scattered. If they can be arranged thematically, that would be the best. So the example that I was sharing about, fruit and vegetables. So, what might tend to happen is that let's make a list of words that children should know: fruit, vegetables, fruit and vegetables that are commonly available, that are not commonly available, and then such lists go on and on. However, if it is arranged in some kind of a theme like market, so that worksheet, for example, was talking about how children can identify what they want to buy from a vegetable seller, a fruit seller, or a grocery store, and they color it or they scribble down their grocery list. So the larger theme, if it is market, going to the market, which we've attempted, in some of the states, northeastern states, then the topics will follow. And in fact, we'll be hard pressed for leaving out some and selecting some. So I think, yeah, that's my response. Pranali, if you want to add something to that. Yeah.
Yeah, not much, but just one point. Doesn't matter what topics there are. But the idea is the approach, the pedagogy, the fun can be brought into whatever topics there is, in the curriculum. So the stress is on the pedagogy, not on the the topics, the list of topics. So yeah, that is what I wanted to add.
So there's another question from Girija, uh, which Girija is asking, will there be any recording or documentation for knowing the growth of the child? So assume this goes to assessment, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, will there be any record? Of course, when you'll have to document and record the child's learning levels. So, through anecdotal records, through observations, you can assess these observations through rubrics, your own interpretation of, because the teacher knows the children very well, and they are the ones who are closely connected to the children. So definitely the recording or the documentation is necessary. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, there should be documentation to know the physical growth, or the cognitive, social emotional growth of the child, and all the domains actually.
I think you mentioned a portfolio also somewhere in the article.
Portfolio,
Yeah.
for the
And
assessment part, you're
yeah,
saying?
I suppose the worksheets could be made part of a portfolio also. Do you think that could work out in terms of what Girija, I assume, is talking about, recording the growth? Yeah. So
Like Rima just said, Rima was sharing about the evidence, how you, collect the worksheets, put them in the portfolios as evidence. They can also be, a form of recording and documenting the child's growth. The worksheet at the month of January, and you look at the worksheet in the month of December, you can see the growth, you can see the change in the child's, whatever domain that is for. So yeah, portfolio is also um, important to keep a track of the child's learning levels.
anything you'd like to add, Rima?
Just one thought that comes to mind when we think of portfolios and recording this as evidence of children's learning, we look at that file as something that we have to show somebody. We have to show this portfolio file to parents. We need to show our school leader or other teachers that, yes, I am doing something in the classroom. Like Pranali mentioned, to look at the child's development over a period of time, say a few months or the year, it's also important that teachers have a discussion. The teachers that are there within the school. Sometimes things, like there are no hard and fast rules regarding whether a child is learning, how is the child progressing in his or her learning. So, having an honest discussion with other teachers, getting feedback from other teachers, comparing notes. There are certain approaches to preschool learning that really emphasize that. In fact, even while teaching in the classroom, for one teacher to take the lead and another buddy teacher to be there to take notes as the teacher is doing something in the classroom. Like we were mentioning at the very beginning, rather than picking one approach and sticking to it, a very like a syncretic approach, will be more suited for a preschool setting.
Yeah. Thank you. So you mentioned, Pranali, that the teacher is familiar with the children, but I mean, it takes time to understand each child. The children have just moved into the teacher's class, or they've just entered the preschool. So, how does the teacher assess? And this is a class, right? Made up of individuals, of course. So, how can the teacher assess the requirements, especially if it's a class she's not familiar with? And how long would the teacher have to wait before she can be sure that she's created a relevant worksheet? So, just wondering.
Yeah. So, see, the first and foremost thing is that Worksheets can also be used to become familiar with them. They're not only for assessment. Worksheet need not be something that is administered at the end of a period after a lesson. It can be used at the beginning itself to understand the child, also become familiar with it. Like I was saying, drawing your family, drawing yourself, drawing, it's something that you like. So that is how you'll get to understand the child and become familiar with the child. And assessment, assessing also doesn't mean grading or evaluating a child, right? So assessing also means to know, understand the child's needs. So worksheets help there. So you need not wait for a long time to administer these. uh, that can happen simultaneously. To understand a child's background, you can have them draw their families. You can have them talk about emotions, draw pictures of emotions, circle them. How are you feeling? So those kind of worksheets can always be used at the beginning itself. Various types of worksheets help you to not only understand the child but also to understand the learning levels, like I was saying before. And consequently, it helps you to improve the or change your instructional strategy. uh, it helps to understand the social emotional development. But again, I like to repeat, like what Rima was saying earlier, it shouldn't be the only tool to understand a child, and this is just one of the tools that can be used. It's at this stage, it's very, very important to focus on talking, listening, providing space for the child to express and experiment. Their innate disposition of experimenting, the curiosity that children have, it should be used to its maximum. And in this entire process, worksheets can be of great help in the process. Like it's one of the uh, tools. Yeah, that is what I believe, Nimrat. Yeah.
No, it makes a lot of sense, Pranali. Anything to add, Rima? Or so okay. Um, See, now this is for you, Rima. Uh, since children in the majority of our preschools do not come from a print-rich or homes in which there's a lot of language, a lot of talking, discussion, dialogue, etc. They come from very varied backgrounds. Some may speak languages or dialects that other children are not familiar with, especially the teacher is not familiar with. So in that situation, how can they be able to help to understand and learn from the same worksheet that is being used in the class, especially if the worksheet uses some kind of language, or is not, or at least in the instructions, etc., there will be some use of language in the worksheet. So how does it play, how do you see it playing out in the classroom in this situation?
So I think a few things that we've established and sort of, I hope we agree that we are not just presenting children with a worksheet and getting them to complete the task and taking the worksheet back. So there is a process to it. There can be a whole experience of learning and activity woven around it, of which the worksheet is one of the several tools. And because we are talking about the preschool stage, the teacher's constant support is there. So anytime the teacher feels that some more scaffolding needs to be provided, maybe I need to use some other way to explain what I just said. Maybe I need to clarify what I want children to do with this piece of paper. So that, and may vary from child to child, needs to happen continuously. So there can be some worksheets that can be taken home and done independently by the child, or with minimal support from parents, assuming that children, because they come from varied backgrounds. Those sort of things, once they are clear in mind, sort of help understand this question better that you have asked. The other thing is that, yes, many children, especially when we talk of government preschools, do not have or do not come from print rich traditions at home. And but they, even when they're 3 years, 4 years old, or they attend only 1 year of preschool, from 5 to 6 years, in which case they will be very proficient in the language that they speak, whatever their language or languages may be. So children do come from backgrounds that have oral rich traditions. Okay, so there are conversations of which they are a part, and they have played, they've conversed, they have cracked jokes, they've listened to stories from maybe a few people, not their grandparents, somebody else. They've played with riddles, they have played games, language games. So they do come with a good repertoire of language, oral language. And the way this meaningful connect was built with oral language, in similar, if not the same ways, a relationship has to be built with the world of print also. Okay, so the key difference is that when it comes to developing oral language, children can be immersed in an environment where there are speakers of a language and adults. And even if there is no direct conversation with the child, it's almost like by osmosis the child picks up the language. Okay, but when it comes to purposively reading and writing in the conventional ways, okay, then some deliberate efforts have to be made by the teacher or by the adult, whoever that is. So in the classroom, the implications for this on the classroom are immense. So, in fact, if I recall correctly, the position paper on teaching of English or some such similar document says that the classroom has to have a print rich environment to the extent that a middle class home does. So, that is the kind of deliberate effort that needs to be made with a young child. So, some implications that this has is firstly that although Pranali mentioned that worksheets can be used early on to become familiar with children, and we've already spoken about the different kinds of worksheets that we can have. But to introduce children to the world of print, worksheets needn't be the child's first encounter with this world of print. So there are several other things that are prerequisites to a good preschool environment. So having lots of picture stories, picture books, story books, charts with children's names, dates, their birth dates, and other words and phrases that they know, songs that are written. All of these should form and part of the child's introduction to the world of print. The other thing is that children naturally display, a lot of behavior where they wish to express themselves through writing. It may, initially be through poetry, initially it may be through
I think we've temporarily lost Rima. So there are a lot of questions, Pranali. So while we wait for Rima to come back, um, Girija has asked again that nowadays, Rima, you're back?
yes,
Yeah.
if you can
Yeah,
hear me,
yeah,
then I'm.
yeah. Yeah, please continue. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Okay, so at
please continue.
what point did you lose me?
So you were talking about, that worksheets are not necessarily the first way to introduce children to language.
Right.
There are many other ways of doing it. So you were describing those ways when you got cut off.
Right, right. So, so the child's introduction to the world of print is through these different ways, right? And the other thing is that to encourage children's natural tendencies to scribble, to draw, and to express themselves. So, by the time there is this worksheet that the child gets, where something has to be done, which is appropriate to the child's age and experience, the child already has some meaningful connect with this world of print. And it's not that the sheet of paper is discarded or misinterpreted to be something that it is not. So, building that connect with the world of print uh, uh, either before or in the process of giving worksheets to children is extremely important, and this is where things are often lacking, which leads to issues with reading and writing at later stages of schooling also. So if that meaningful connect is built at the preschool stage, that would be extremely helpful. Then having uniform worksheets or worksheets where children can respond in their own ways, because we have created worksheets through very creative ways. Then those worksheets can be very accommodating if they are so designed.
Right. Thanks, Rima. So I was just telling Pranali when you dropped out that there are a few questions. So Girija has asked once again that nowadays children are tech savvy. Can we also use tech-based fun sheets with lots of color, shape, size preparation, and identification?
I feel that yes, if it is available, if the children are access, they can access these tech savvy um, devices, the softwares and everything. So it is all right if they can have fun with it. It's not bad. It's not something that we should avoid doing that if it is something related to digital world or technology. It's not that, but it's just that how much of time do you want to engage the child with that, and or is it only that? So there has to be concrete experiences also, hands-on experiences also, along with these tech-based fun sheets. So yeah, that is what I think, Girija.
There are a lot of questions now, so I'll just read them out. Harsha is asking, what are some of the key prerequisites, must-dos in assessing a preschool child? So this is more to do with assessment.
Yeah.
Prerequisites, must-dos in assessing a preschool child.
um See, the first thing I would say right now will be the learning outcomes. The teacher has to be familiar with the learning outcomes of all these age groups, and they are there. Our government has detailed them out, so it's there. You can anybody can go and have a look at them. First is that have check out what are the expectations. Second is, when you're assessing, use multiple modes of assessment. It should not be just one paper pencil test, or handing over a worksheet and filling it up. So it shouldn't be that. You can use a lot of other methods of assessment along with this. Observation is one. Like I was saying, anecdotal records. Keeping a record of that, checklists, rating scales, using rubrics. So there are multiple methods of assessment, so you can use those. Keep all of these methods in mind, because as we both, Rima and I, explained before, that children develop at different paces. Every child is different. So when you're using all these methods, you'll be able to tap the child's ability. You'll be able to understand each child's learning level. And third, I feel, is also to close this entire loop. All the data that you have gained from the assessment, you also have to use that. It's not just to hand it over to the parents or hand it over to the child that you have fed, you have been graded this or whatever, but you have to close the loop. And how will you close it? Getting that data and incorporating the learnings from that data into your pedagogical techniques, into your pedagogy. I feel these are the broad must do's of assessment at this stage.
Thanks, Pranali. We have three more questions, so quickly we can take them, Shefali. Yeah, thanks. So one is Shamna is asking, what are the baby steps for worksheet for developing reading skill? Baby steps for developing worksheet for reading skills.
So one baby step could be, to not look at the worksheet as having a set of words and sentences that the child needs to read and maybe respond to some questions. The genesis of reading should take place, like we were saying, by reading your own name, by recognizing words that are familiar in the child's oral language. And that needn't happen with worksheets. Okay. That can happen with flashcards, that can happen with a huge chart, that can happen with the blackboard, and that certainly must happen with read aloud sessions. Okay, I don't want to digress from the topic of worksheets, but it's important that we understand and try to practice some of these things. Where encouraging children to read does not happen through worksheets. Okay, and then maybe like some ideas that Pranali was sharing, having your name written that you can, color over, design patterns over, that can be a small way to get initiated. Oh yes, this is my name, or this is something I love to eat, this is my mother's name, or this is the name of the place where I stay, and come, let me color it in the color that I like. So once that meaningful association with print is built, then we can take it in any and every direction. I mean, and an important thing to remember is that when, even now as adults, when we read, we don't necessarily know the meaning of all words. There can be several words that children are reading for the first time, encountering for the first time, and don't know the meanings of, as long as there is some beautiful, vivid picture that accompanies the text. There is some context in the worksheet. So there is a picture, there is a line that, there is a sentence that captions the picture, or there is a two-line story. Some familiar words are highlighted in a different color, and with, after reading that story which is given in a worksheet, there is a discussion. What do you think happens next? And the teacher, writes down what the child has said, because children might not yet be very comfortable writing down. Then the child reads what he or she has said and the teacher has written down. So, knowing that I am an active participant in the reading and writing process, and believing that gets children very, very curious to learn whatever else is left for them to learn. Oh, I want to know what the convention, what the correct spelling is, so that the next time I can write it by myself. Or the teacher writes it for me. I want to learn how I can write it by myself. Or when will I reach that? When will that happen? So, those are some baby steps, hopefully. Please don't look at the worksheet in isolation, or a tool by itself. Uh,
Thanks, Rima. Gitika is asking, is saying numbers and alphabets orally without forming any context helpful for learning sequence for preschoolers? Saying numbers and alphabets orally without forming any context helpful for the learning sequence for preschoolers.
I'll interrupt you all here.
Yeah.
We've,
yeah.
I mean, it's already 5:30, but quickly, can very briefly, let's just, yeah,
Yeah.
do the, yeah, just take this question and
So,
the next.
I'll just read out the next question as well. Does the traditional approach of teaching, if aligned with the context, is the traditional approach of teaching helpful if it is aligned with the context? So
So
you
I'll
can
give a
just,
very quick
yeah.
response to Geetika's question. Is saying numbers and alphabet orally helpful in learning the sequence? So the simple response is yes. Children are very good at memorizing stuff. Okay, we can get them to memorize the letters A to Z and sing the letters and sing all the numbers up to 10,000 or more, and they can build on and on. But what then? What next? So often we tell teachers we interact with that, okay, you can get that out of the way, get them to memorize everything, but then what do you want them to do with it next? And will only memorizing serve the purpose? So what does it mean to count? What do I do with these letters, these letter names? Asking yourself what next would be a good idea after all this memorization takes place.
Right. And of course, alignment to the context is useful, right? That goes without saying,
Yeah.
right, Pranali?
Yes,
Any
yes,
comments on
definitely.
that?
Has to be contextual, but also the traditional approach. What traditional approach? If it's just rote memorization, then you have to really look into that. But yes,
Right. Yeah, that's very true.
I actually wanted to just add just a few a point that was in my head, that there can be a lot of debate on the the damaging effects of using worksheets also, but we have to see that worksheet doesn't end there. There's not a full stop there. You have to rework on it, getting the data from the worksheet and rework on it. So if there are beliefs that worksheet doesn't allow collaborative work, let the child work in pairs, or collaborative projects can be given and worksheets can be given. So I agree that there are two, what do you call, views on using worksheets, but that is okay. But how do you use them in the classroom is more important.
Right. So thank you very much, Pranali. Rima, over to you, Shafali.
Yeah, I think we have to absolutely close now. Thank you so much, Rima, Pranali, Nimrat. Very fascinating discussion, and we hope we could go on, but all good things must end. And thank you everyone for joining us on the YouTube channel. And hope to see you again next month. First Wednesday of the month is at 4:30. We have this learning curve live. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Shefali.
much.